after a year of planning for this, and I think really it was kind of a pipe dream to do this in the first place. And I think when Ali brought it up with me from KCSB, I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to do that. And it's been amazing because we were able to do it, and we were able to do it, I think, partly helped enable the tour to happen through KCSB. So I'm really proud of them for doing that and being able to make that. Also thinking about the film a lot in the last few years. I think it came out just before Prince died, and there's so much to think about there, and with Mdou and the collaboration. So I have a couple of questions, and then we'll open up to Q&A. I didn't say who I am. I'm David Novak, and I direct the Center for the Interdisciplinary Center. Even I can't say it. The Center for the Interdisciplinary Study of Music. We really wanted to talk about some of my students are here today too as well. I teach music and documentary film, and so I had a few questions about this film in relation to sort of the ethnographic participation stuff, and part of it is the relationship that you have with Mdou and the long time that this took to develop. So I wanted to start just asking you the background of how you found Mdou's music, and then how that relationship built to the collaboration in writing the film.
In the brief version, I was traveling around West Africa in 2008, 2009, and I started a blog doing field recordings, meeting with musicians, focused mainly on guitar music. And while I was doing those field recordings, I noticed that also there was a wealth of music that people were listening to on their cell phones as well. So while I was doing this field recording and trying to capture things that were happening live, there was this whole network of music being traded around on MP3. So I started collecting that as another means of collecting. So aside of just doing field recordings, collecting digital media from people's
This was stuff that people were recording on their cell phones?
So not necessarily. It was music that was being traded on phones. So the phone was the medium, just like a cassette could be a medium, or a DIY medium that people were trading. And the phones enabled you to send music via Bluetooth. And at the time, there was not a lot of internet in the region, so if music had to really travel with people. And I've heard this term sneakernet before to refer to like a ways of an analog to the internet in some ways. So that's what happened. That somebody could get on a bus, bring a song to another town, people would sit around on their phones listening to it, and someone would say, oh, can I get a copy of that? And send it over to the next person who would get on another bus and travel to another city. So a lot of it was just music that didn't have any possibility to be recorded in a studio and get an official CD release or anything. And one of the songs that I heard circulating, getting back to Mdou, was his song on the opening credits. And it really stood out because it had a drum machine and auto-tuned vocals. And that was very new in Tuareg music. I spent a couple of years trying to find out who Mdou was, and nobody knew who he was because, of course, with the MP3, all you have is this ID3 tag that in most cases had been replaced with names of various cyber cafes all over West Africa in terms of being able to promote people's cyber cafes. So eventually I was able to track him down because another Tuareg gentleman identified the dialect that he was speaking as being from Tawa in Niger. And so I just I've gone on Facebook and looked for people who lived in Tawa with a picture of a guitar in their profile. And I just sent everybody this copy and pasted email message with a short clip of the song. And that actually worked. I got Mdou's number, I called him. He didn't believe me that I was an American who was looking for him. That was a little too far out. But eventually he understood who I was and what I was working on. And shortly after that I went to Niger to meet with him.
And when you found him, what did you say? I want to work with you, I want to do something with you? What happened next?
Yeah, so we released a compilation of music that was collected from cell phones.
That was the music from Saharan cell phones.
Yeah,
record,
yeah. The title is exactly what it is. And so based on that, I said, okay, we've worked together. I want to go meet with you. So I went to Niger to meet with Mdou, and I showed up in his town in Abalek. And immediately, I said, okay, so let's see the drum machine and the auto-tune pedal. And he's like, no, I don't like auto-tune drum machine music. That was just something I did in the studio. I thought, okay, well, I traveled all this way to meet this guy who plays auto-tune music. And but then he played his music, and it was amazing. He had a very interesting style that differed from a lot of other guitarists. And so I spent a couple weeks with him, about 3 weeks, hanging out, going to weddings, listening to him play with his friends, and we recorded over those 3 weeks and created our first album together.
And what gave you the idea to come back for a film? Were you already making films?
No. I made short YouTube videos, but I hadn't made any film. The film was an idea that had been kicking around for a while, though, to create a narrative rather than a documentary. There's a lot of documentaries about Tuareg music. I wanted to be able to share with people here a little more context, give some context to the music, because we hear it, but we don't have any context to it. And I can write liner notes, but people don't always want to read them, and it's very didactic to explain all the time what's happening. And a documentary would be an interesting film for people in the West, but I knew that my friends in Agadez don't care about a documentary about Tuareg guitar. They don't need to be told what it is. And so that we hit on this idea of doing a narrative feature instead that could kind of serve both purposes. It could exist in the West, give an idea of what's happening, but also be something, a political film in some ways, because we'd shoot it in Tamashek, and that it could be a film for the people who made it.
So it is the first feature-length film in Tamashek, and so when people saw that in Agadez, I'm jumping to the end, but or not the end at all, but the point when you had finished it and you screened it in Agadez, what was the reaction? First I want to ask, did people know the story at all? I'm guessing they didn't know Purple Rain, and did they know Prince's music? And was it any kind of connection there? And then did they have a reaction to it being in Tamashek and being a depiction of life there?
Yeah, so nobody knew about Prince or Purple Rain. That was completely something that I brought to that area. One thing was people hadn't made a lot of films. Obviously everybody in Agadez, say obviously, but everyone's pretty hip to it. Hollywood, Nollywood, especially northern Nigeria, Kannywood, House of Film. So there's a lot of film. People are watching Chinese DVD bootlegs of everything, but there's no film industry in Agadez. There's no Tuareg film industry. So I think that when we first made the film, there was some apprehension of like, well, what is this going to be? Particularly with the women who are involved, of how they would be portrayed on the screen and what was their role going to be, and so there was a lot of apprehension. I think it's a good word for the actors, but also for just the community when they saw that we were going to be making a film.
So there might be consequences for some of the actors in being in the film.
Exactly. So I think when we made the film, and then everybody could see what the film was, that was really important. That immediately we showed it in Agadez, so people could see, this is a very G film. Yeah. It's nothing like Purple Rain. Right. And also, but getting back to the response, people were really excited just to see the city on the screen, and to see things like tea being poured. It elicited these cheers at sort of these moments that I didn't anticipate, like when a motorcycle revs, or like when tea is poured, people were cheering for that, which I didn't expect.
One of the things about it is the ethnographic setting is so important, and in a way, what we were speaking in my class about, what are the boundaries between feature films, fiction films, and documentary, and here you have these live performances, and I guess it looked to me like they were synced. It was the music we recorded was the music Or was that
We just did a lot of
clever-
editing
Okay.
for the film, yeah.
So, but when you made these, when you shot these, you had to have performances, and I guess some of them were weddings and things like that that you just offered to play.
Yeah, so a lot of the wedding footage was in real weddings that we shot, and where Mdou would play in real weddings, and then we intercut that with staged weddings, so we did second scenes. The final competition, for example, is a really good example of that, because we rented the place for 2 nights. One night we performed all the pieces on stage, all the close-ups, all the action between Mdou and Kader. The second night we had a free show where Kader would play and where Mdou would play. But unfortunately it got announced as like this competition, and people began to think it was a competition between Mdou and Kader, and Mdou's fans were cheering and booing Kader, and we actually had to go on the radio after the film to all of us went on the radio together to tell everybody in Akounak that they are actually friends, that this wasn't a competition, we're making a film. So it definitely blurred the line of documentary and narrative.
I mean, it's in a way like the music industry here. You got to create some tension. It's a narrative there. So when you decided to collaborate on this film, what was the co-writing process like? I know you were spending a lot of time sitting and thinking about what you were going to do, and I know that some of your ideas were turned on their heads by Mdou.
Yeah. The writing process, it was myself and also the cinematographer Jerome Fino, who French cinematographer who came with me, and we both brought the film to Mdou. We spent about 3 weeks on that first trip, and during that time, that's when we first talked about the film. We talked about Purple Rain. We watched it. We also watched some Jean Rouge films at that time as well, and rockers. And during that time, we developed a story. So it was a very loose story. We sat around drinking tea. I had a little microphone so I could record our conversations, and various people would pop in and add their ideas and walk out. So it was very collaborative in that stage. I took that and wrote that into a script, but a very loose script that was more of suggestions of an outline in some ways. And then that script, when we shot with it, was totally reinterpreted by everybody who was in it. I don't speak Tamashek, so I didn't know what anybody was saying. I would explain the scene to remind him to, okay, explain this to the actors here. He would translate it, the performer would shoot it, but, I didn't know what was being said, Jerome didn't know, Mdou knew, but he didn't know what we had shot and what we hadn't shot. So it was kind of a confusing process.
Well, it came out really great, despite all of this. And, thinking about the participation there, the story of Purple Rain, it doesn't really work with some of the restrictions in showing what social life is really like in Agadez. You can't just take that story and remake it, and you have to do things differently. And so I wanted to talk about that, some of the relationships that are so important for Prince and Purple Rain that have to be different here, like the tension with the father and violence that couldn't be shown.
Yeah, I think it's also important that we weren't so bound to that idea of the remake. The remake was definitely an idea, the inspiration of it, and that we let it travel to different places. In terms of this, what matched up is what already had kind of come to mind when we hit on the idea, because there are the conflicts with family about music. There is an intense competition of everybody wanting to be a star in a very, very small music scene with a lot of money. It's a lot of potential for money. So these were the elements that we really latched on from Purple Rain to translate. The conflict with Mdou and his father, that's a real thing from Mdou's life. It's from a lot of guitarists' life. The scene where he's making tea with a guitar, that didn't happen to Mdou, but it happened to another friend of ours who told us.
Really happened. They
Yeah, really,
guitar and made tea.
And really made tea out of it. So yeah, some of these elements were adapted, but mostly from biographical pieces, not from. We tried not to really impose anything from the Purple Rain narrative. because we didn't have to.
Talk about your films that you've made since then. You finished one film this year, and you're going back to shoot another next year.
Yeah, so the film we just finished is with Mdou Moctar, who's the rhythm guitarist in the film, and also he'll be right over here tonight with the red guitar. And we made a magical tale about the search for this city, this lost city in the desert. It's sort of based around like spaghetti westerns, but also folklore, Saharan folklore, and this idea of migration with immigrants who are coming through Agadez looking for this magical place, which often means Europe, but in this case we created this magical city. And so that's called Zerzura, and we just finished, we just premiered that film.
Great. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. And the next film we're making is, so while we're making Zerzura, I should add this was happening, while we had just finished shooting Zerzura, one of Ahmadou's friends said, okay, well, when we're done with this film, you know, with your film, can we do the film that we want to do? And I said, well, I thought we were doing the film that we all wanted to do, but okay, what do you want to do? And he said, well, we want to remake Titanic in the Sahara. And I said, yes, we're gonna do that. I didn't know anything about it at the time, but I just said, that has to happen, whatever that means. And so now they've written a story. It's about a truck in the place of the boat transporting migrants across the Sahara that hits a rock buried in the sand. But it's kind of great. It's going to be, yeah, and we're doing a writing residency with Mdou and another collaborator from Niger next month, and shooting that in April, inshallah.
I want to see if we have a few questions from the audience here.
I was wondering, I hope I'm saying this right, Mdou's aspirations. What were his aspirations before, say, meeting you? Like, what does a guitarist's career look like for the Tuareg?
I would say mostly playing in weddings, becoming a successful guitarist who plays in the wedding scene in Agadez. It's a very lucrative scene. You will get a contract to play, a set price to play, but then during the wedding, people throw money at you, and then that money is also something that's collected and is for the musicians. So it's very lucrative, though. I mean, you could earn thousands of dollars playing in a wedding. So the more prestigious guitarists, that's how much they earn. So I'd say that's the long-term, that was Mdou's long-term goal, or any guitarist's long-term goal, is to be able to make their money from music, which is actually easier to do, I think, in Niger than it is here.
Thank you. I have a musical question about, so the music that they play with the guitar now, I suppose they are replacing some more ancient and traditional form of instrument. Can you give us some information or describe the kind of instrument that is now being replaced by the guitar?
So the traditional guitar is the antecedent of the banjo. It's the West African traditional guitar, and it goes by a lot of different names. The ngoni, for the tamashek, it's called the tahari. It's a wooden body with the goat skin stretched across it. It's usually 4 or 5 strings, and so that's the traditional guitar. In the 1970s and 80s, that guitar became electrified, and people started playing music called takamba on that guitar. So we've had electrified music since that time. Throughout the 80s and into the late 90s, that style was still the very popular style. It was electrified, but it was traditional, if that makes sense. I mean, everything's always changing so frequently there. But the electric guitar, this music really became in the mode in the late 90s. And although it started much earlier than that, but now it's mostly replaced the traditional music. The main difference between traditional and this music is you don't have to be of the cast of musicians to play electric guitar. However, to play traditional guitar, you really must be of that cast in society it's a bit strange if you pick that musical instrument without being from that cast.
Thank you. My question is actually not musical, but I'm curious about how was received the fact that this friend went out with him by herself in a very kind of free-spirited. And if you look at the background, she and the woman, her friend at the first, and the mother are the only women that you see, especially from the take out from the town. So, which lead me to believe that there are not that many women outside. And so how was she perceived after the movie was screened in Agadez?
Yeah, she's been very happy with the film, and so after the film, there wasn't any problems. I think because the activity in that film, what we portrayed, does happen. Young people do go off and they flirt and they go off into the desert and they go to picnics and they do spend time alone, and that's acceptable behavior. You do see men and women together on motorbikes there as well. Agadez is while you might not see that certainly in the bush, in the nomad camps around there, you would never see this. But Agadez is very urban, very modern in the sensibilities. I do want to speak to that idea because I've had a few people ask questions, and for a long time I didn't know necessarily how to answer, because I think the film doesn't do a very good job of showing women's experience in Niger, and I've had some time to really reflect on that. And it's because largely my experience is with male musicians, and that's been my in to the culture. So I think it's important when we talk about the film as maybe an ethnographic film. It's also a very male ethnographic film, because I don't have access to the world of the very gender segregated world. It's not often that I even can really speak to a woman there and get her experience so often. So yeah.
I actually had the opportunity to attend a Tuareg wedding a long time ago, and there were male musicians who played first, and then they left, and a group of women came. With a particular kind of drum, they made a hole on the floor, and the foot of the drum was basically anchored, and the drum had two sets of sticks. They sat on it to stretch the top of it, and they put a wet cloth to kind of go, I don't know exactly what for, and they sang for as much as the men had sang in their wedding, and they also were given money in the same way. Have you come across that kind of music also in a Tuareg wedding?
Yeah, so that music is less and less at weddings in the city. That music it's called Tende, Tende, and if you get a chance to look that up, you should, because it's amazing music, and it's the drum is actually made out of a mortar and pestle. So the two long pieces are put over the other piece with the goat skin, and it's constantly wetted while you play with a calabash that's half buried in water to provide this base, and it's a women-dominated traditional music, and it's still very common in the nomad camps. So if you leave the city, you're going to hear this music at night, especially in the rainy season when people are coming together. And that was the music for a very long time before the electric guitar. And it also is, if you listen closely to this guitar music, you can hear where this music. There's a whole other story, but yeah, this music is really important in the development of Tuareg guitar as well.
I've read that this film was also influenced by Harry Hensel's "The Harder They Come," which stars Jimmy Cliff, and that got me thinking about how actually Purple Rain is really like a classic Hollywood, or example of classic Hollywood cinema, and that The Harder They Come is more experimental, but maybe you could address the influence of that film on your approach here.
Well, I think that film, what I really enjoyed was how real DIY it was, and working on a film with a very low budget. I mean, I want to emphasize that we made this film in 10 days. Jerome, who shot the film, comes from experimental film background. I don't come from any film background. We were using a painter's pole for a boom mic, a lot of YouTube videos. I read Wikipedia on how to write a script. Like that, nothing in here was professional. And all our cast were non-actors, so there was just sort of like, neo-realist element of just finding people and saying, okay, let's do this in one take. So, and I felt that closer when I watched The Harder They Come, that there's this element of just being very, very live and very happening. Where Purple Rain is obviously a Hollywood production. I think a lot of it was made in the studio too. People in Minneapolis don't like to talk about that. I was told not to talk about that.
Why does Mdou ride in the purple motorcycle all the time?
Well, that's actually exactly related to Purple Rain. So in the film Purple Rain, Prince really loves the color purple, and he rides on a purple motorbike, and he always dresses in purple. So we wanted to reference that film. So we got a motorcycle, we covered it in tape, and then we painted it purple.
How can we get the music?
There's a soundtrack to the film. The same title, and you can find it online at Sahel Sounds is the name of the label. It's so we have it available on Bandcamp, iTunes, and I don't know what the kids listen to, Spotify.
How can we find your next film?
So everything is on our website, which is Sahel Sounds as well, SAHEL Sounds, and yeah, we should have more information available, particularly about the upcoming Titanic project.